Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on the education minister facing a recall petition. But first, ending the strike by Alberta teachers.
Just give an honest assessment of whether they think it's fair. Most of the parents I talk to, they think it's fair. Many of the teachers who've contacted us, they think it's fair. And I think most of all, it's fair to the students who are the ones who are most impacted.
The Smith government fast-tracked back-to-work legislation Monday, including unprecedented use of the notwithstanding clause to send teachers and their students back to class, and in the process, imposing a new 3-year agreement. And joining us now, Jason Foster, a labor relations professor with Athabasca University. Jason, good to see you. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so maybe first question, how necessary was it for the government to use the notwithstanding clause in taking away teachers' right to strike?
This bill took multiple steps farther than it needed to end this strike. We see back to work legislation all the time, not all the time, but frequently. And most of the time, what we'll do is they'll order the workers back to work, and they'll impose binding arbitration. Binding arbitration isn't ideal. It's got its own problems, but at least it's still a legitimate part of the labor relations process. Imposing the contract and then using the notwithstanding clause is something of a sledgehammer. That probably didn't need to go this far in order to solve this problem.
So where does this leave teachers? Do they just take this and move on?
Well, we'll have to see what they decide in the next day or two. They certainly have a couple of options. They could refuse to go back and continue their strike. The bill has hefty penalties for doing so, but they certainly could do it. The airline attendants for Air Canada did it last summer. And they could go back to work and say, okay, well, we tried, and accept the outcome. Or they could do some kind of middle ground where they go back to work, but then certain activities, the voluntary activities that we know that every teacher does to help keep the school running and give the kids an enhanced experience, they may choose to not do that stuff anymore because they're so mad. And so, the next few days we'll see what they do, but those are certainly the options they have.
And how does this end up reflecting on the Smith government? Because use of the notwithstanding clause, it's essentially an admission that they know they're impairing a constitutional right, is it not?
Oh, that's exactly how I see this. This is an admission that they are breaching the charter. So that means they know that they are trampling on the teachers' rights. They're doing so in a couple of different ways, and they're just trying to escape the consequences of taking that action. We have, a tried and true system of checks and balances where, legislatures legislate, but then the courts can decide whether that indeed is constitutional and appropriate for them to do. By eliminating that check and balance that the judiciary offers, it kind of makes them unaccountable. They're not accountable to anybody for trampling on these rights. And I think the other concern, as we think about the bigger picture, is this sends actually a very ominous message to other public sector workers in Alberta. And I think it also has the potential to create an unfortunate precedent for governments in other jurisdictions.
Okay. So maybe to follow up on that, where does that then leave the process of public sector bargaining in our province moving forward? Because there are other unions in the queue right now, right? HSAA, AUPE.
Yep, indeed. There are still a number of important contracts that need to be negotiated, and it kind of, you could say that it leaves it in a bit of tatters. If you were a union right now at the bargaining table, the message seems to be clearly, well, if you don't accept what we're offering, we'll just force it on you anyway. One of the things we find about this kind of government intervention in bargaining is that it eliminates the employer's interest or motivation to negotiate. Because why would you negotiate if the government could just impose the deal that you want them to impose? And so it really does break down what the bargaining relationship. It makes what's happening at the bargaining table kind of irrelevant in many, many ways. And so it creates a wide range of problems.
Okay, so maybe again on that precedent point, would you go so far as to say that at this stage, provincial governments are normalizing use of the notwithstanding clause?
Yes, I think that's why this is so concerning. I mean, we've been seeing increased use of the notwithstanding clause in general on other issues, and this would be a troubling expansion of using the notwithstanding clause in labor relations matters, and that's something that they've generally not done. And so, if this is a turning point where governments start to do that, that's something that I would think that unions across the country should be concerned about.
When it comes to response, potential blowback, is this something that remains within the labor sector?
Oh, well, I think, again, we'll see what happens over the next couple of days, but I do think this is the kind of thing that gets labor movements riled up. They see this, the contravening of basic fundamental labor rights. They see that as an existential challenge, and so that is the kind of thing that could cause labor movements to rise up, which means we could actually see an expansion of this dispute, especially if some of the national unions start paying attention and start turning some of their resources this way. We could be in for a very tumultuous time.
So in terms of a strong response, it may come from even outside our provincial boundaries. It may not only be here in Alberta.
I think that's entirely possible. I think that may have been a calculation that the government neglected to make, is that by using the notwithstanding clause, they draw the attention not just of teachers, not just of the Alberta labor movement, but of every union in the country, because their concern is that it'll get used on them next, and so they want to try and prevent that from happening.
And in terms of parents, do you see parents doing anything in the wake of this, or do families move on? School continues. We're back to class.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm hearing that there are some students in the Edmonton area who are organizing a walkout for later this week in protest. So clearly, at least some of the students aren't prepared to just let go of it and move on. I can respect that probably most families, though, are relieved to be through this, 3.5 weeks of challenging time, and are probably grateful just to get, life routines back going again. I can totally respect that. But to be clear, this legislation didn't solve the conflict. It's just kicked it down the road into the future. And so it will bubble up again.
All right. We'll have to leave it there, Jason. Appreciate your time this evening. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Jason Foster is a labor relations professor with Athabasca University.